Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the August 9th meeting of the Comox Valley Sewage Commission. And I'd like to acknowledge that our meeting is taking place on the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. I'd like to welcome everyone who's here in the room with us today, including CVRT staff and Sewage Commission directors. I'd like to acknowledge Director Theos here, standing in for Director Cole Hamilton. Director McGowan, nice to see you in person. And Major Stevens, nice to see you in person. And I'll just turn it over to you to explain. You have a colleague with you today.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to introduce Major Mitch Hargreaves. He will be assuming my role as of tomorrow. So today is my official last attendance at this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll watch carefully to see that only one hand is being raised to vote from the two of you.
You won't see it.
All right, so we're going to move right away into the management report from the management report dated August 2022 for receipt. A motion, please.
Second.
Moved by Morin, seconded by Swift. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing here none, all those in favor? Any opposed? It's carried unanimously. Moving on to the Comox Valley Sewage Management Advisory Committee meeting of July 26th, minutes for receipt. Moved Grant, seconded Morin. Questions or comments? Director Swift.
Thank you. I noticed in the minutes that there's the need for a second Comox pump station. And I'm wondering, it looks like it's in the future, but I'm wondering a couple of things. What's driving the need? How soon will it be required? And would it be subject to the same elevation restrictions and so on that the previous ones were subject to?
And our CAO, Mr. Dyson.
Thank you very much. And I'll just ask Chris whether those matters or questions will be answered in your report or whether you would like to address them now, Chris.
Thanks, and through the chair. So yes, I will be touching on that very topic during my presentation. Yep.
Thanks for that. And no further questions or comment. We'll take the vote on the advisory committee minutes. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. And moving on to the sewer system conveyance project milestones and decision points, a report dated August 5th for receipt, please. Moved by Grant, seconded by Swift, and we'll pass it over to staff.
Thank you very much, Chair and Commissioners. And you have before you a comprehensive report that leads to major decisions to be made tonight. There are 4 recommendations for the Commission for consideration to advance the conveyance project. Our project lead, Chris LaRose, will provide a presentation to you detailing each of the components of this project. And he will be supported by John Este from Colliers, who is online, but they have a PowerPoint to follow. I suggest to Chris that Chris provide a break after each sort of component of the project to enable your questions, because there are a number of components to explain, and that will enable the Commission to engage with staff and have your questions answered on each of the various components. But I'll ask Chris if you could sort of let them know when those breaks are and the good time to respond to questions. So Chris LaRose.
Well, just before Chris picks it up, Mr. Dyson, could you advise us if the intent is that we'll vote once on the entire report, including all the appendices?
Yeah, the intention is that you would receive the report that will include all the appendices that support it. And then each of the 4 recommendations you would consider in isolation or independently of each other. Yeah.
Thanks very much for that clarification. And over to Chris LaRose.
Thank you, Russell, and through the chair. So as Russell intimated, this is a large and significant report. You can tell by the number of appendices and schedules and recommendations on the agenda there. So it provides a detailed update on all key aspects of the conveyance project to support a series of recommendations that, if approved, will provide a green light to commit to procurement of the significant project. So getting the project to this point has involved a huge amount of work from CVRT staff, elected officials, Our project partners at the town of Comox, the Comox First Nation, the city of Courtenay, and the public who have participated in the numerous opportunities for public engagement throughout the process, including the 3-year liquid waste management planning process. So following other similar reports for the water treatment project, and then earlier on in this conveyance project, most of the information in the report is attached as schedules or appendices to keep the body readable. So I'll be speaking to most of the items, but as Russell mentioned, we do have on the line John Esty, our project manager with Colliers International, as well as calling on Kevin DeVille, the CBRD manager of financial planning, to support on several key items. Rather than, and like Russell mentioned, rather than ask you to remember your questions through to the end, I'll be breaking after each section for an opportunity for questions or discussion. So other than the 3 items, so first of all, starting off with the project scope. So other than the 3 items that I'll be highlighting here today, the rest of the project scope was finalized in February at the February 21st Sewage Commission meeting this year. And that's what's reflected here on this final conveyance route map, which has formed the basis for our consultation since February. So just very briefly, I'm sure you're quite familiar with this by now, but what we're looking at is a replacement of the Courtenay pump station. So working from west to east, and then a cut and cover pipeline from there along Comox Road, leaving Comox Road around Farmview or the rotary bird viewing platform, crossing the ALR, some ALR parcels to avoid a known archaeologically sensitive area along Comox Road, and then coming back down to Comox Road on the west boundary of KFN, where we'll be continuing cut and cover along the Ministry Road right-of-way, up Comox Hill, and then into the town, and crossing about 3.5 kilometers of town streets as we progress from west to east. And as I'll touch on in a later slide, incorporating some elements of town service improvements. Along the way, we'll be upgrading the Comox pump station, and then continuing along cut and cover to Torrance. And that section of orange alignment is a tunneled section about 1.3 kilometers using horizontal directional drilling, where we'll be tunneling under the height of land, which rises up to about 60 meters at that location. So that'll save significantly in terms of pumping costs and pressure. And then surfacing on Moreland Road and then cutting across Lazo Marsh to the treatment plant. So the first of the 3 items that were identified in February as being outstanding is the Courtenay pump station siting. So since February, we completed a detailed siting study for this facility. We initiated negotiations with the landowner, Gary Knopp, and we secured Agricultural Land Commission approval for siting this pump station on about 0.55 acres of agricultural land reserve land. So the new site will provide significantly reduced seismic risk by shifting the station farther away from the river channel into which it otherwise might kind of shift towards during a major seismic event of the type that are expected in this area. So we're working closely with the property owner, with the Comox First Nation, and an architect on our owner's engineers team to ensure that the new facility will blend into the surroundings while keeping it simple and cost effective. So the second of the 3 items is the method and means of crossing IR1. So driven by our commitment to complying with the Comox First Nation cultural heritage policy and our need to minimize project costs and risks, as well as traffic impacts to the community, we completed an in-depth assessment of options for crossing IR1 with minimal disturbance of the not already disturbed midden material in that area. So the diagram on the left, it's a little hard to view, but the gray in the middle there is the KFN IR1, with the blue being the alignment, and that red layer is the known archaeological zone in this area, and it really dominates the section between the west boundary of IR1 and Bayside Road. And so that's the section that we were looking for alternatives to this, digging a new trench. And so the photo on the right, and that arrow, blue arrow, points down to roughly where it was taken. So approximately in front of the band office. So during construction of the original, the existing force main. So you'll see a few things from that photo. First, you'll see there's no shoring, so safety standards have changed quite a bit since the pipe was put in 40 years ago. But that dark layer of ground towards the top of the trench is the midden kind of zone in that area, and the white layer above it. So the solution that we've ended up on is actually making use of that trench by installing a bypass. So we'll be tying into the pipe at either end of that section, putting some valves in, and then installing a pipe along the surface to allow us to decommission that section. Sorry, to turn the flow off to that section, cut it, dig it up, remove it from the ground, working to stay within that previously disturbed trench as much as possible. And then installing the new pipe, backfilling, and then putting it back into service. So in this way, we hope to keep the disturbance of the undisturbed material in this area to just a small pit at either end of that pipe, where the connections to the existing pipe will be made. I'll speak a little bit more about that, about the CHP process when we get to that section of the agenda. The third item I wanted to highlight were the town of Comox surface improvements that I touched on briefly earlier. So in addition to the 3.5 kilometers of force main installation across the town, and in parallel with the planning and design of that, town of Comox staff undertook a review of the planned capital works that have been on the schedule or on the agenda within the town, and concluded that 5 projects along that alignment should be delivered at the same time as this project to avoid exacerbating the impact on residents and businesses. So the 5 projects are from left to right, from west to east, are 2 roundabouts. So one at Glacier View Drive, and the other at Rodello. So both of those would be delivered at the same time as part of this contract. And then as well as that rectangular section just straddling the 2 accesses to Marina Park. So from Church Street to Norden along Beaufort, would see a complete complete upgrade of that roadway to the new town standard. And then moving farther to the east, 2 sections of Balmoral. So starting at Stewart, where we come up, Stewart to just past Pritchard, and then the last section straddling Brooklyn Creek all the way to Torrance. So the town has worked with design engineers to develop a detailed design for each one of these 5. And this will be provided to our design engineers, so Matt Culhaney, who are working on developing the detailed design for this component of the project. And then they'll take that, insert it into our detailed design, and then procure that work together under a single contract. So that design work by the town is still underway, but the current estimate for the total capital value of that, those works is between $8 to $10 million, and that's approximately 1/3 of the estimated $26 million that the base scope or the base delivery of that force main across the town of Comox. So I'll stop here for any questions about these 3 final scope items before I move forward.
Thanks very much, Chris. And at this point, we'll open the floor to questions. And it looks like Director Grant, are you poised to ask?
I was just wondering, I was just trying to find in the report on the Courtney pump station, is there going to be odor suppression on there? I would assume there would be. But
Yes.
I know the old one from time to time, there was a bit of a smell there. So
Yeah, you're right. The existing facility does not have any odor control to speak of. So we are planning to include a modern kind of odor control system at the new facility, just in anticipation that traffic and development will grow. Yeah, so it's not a significant cost item for that facility, but it will be sufficient to ensure that that odor is not an issue.
All right, I don't see any further questions at this stage, so feel free to move ahead, Chris.
Great, thanks. Yes, the next item to provide an overview of is the Town of Comox project agreement. So attached to the report as Appendix D is an advanced draft of the Town of Comox project agreement. So I've just kind of put some bullets on the slide here that they're kind of the high points of the agreement. It's a fairly lengthy and significant document, but these are the highlights. So it speaks to how so what specifically what scope will be delivered as part of those Comox service improvements, and how decisions will be made in terms of during design, during construction, if there are change orders or other changes that come up. It outlines a CVRD financial contribution towards those works or to the town in compensation for the impact of the project delivery and the presence of that pipe indefinitely within the roadways. We are talking about a 1 meter diameter pipe approximately that will be maybe a constraining presence within the town streets for indefinitely. So that's set at $3 million. It also outlines the terms for funding of a full-time position during the delivery or during the construction period, employed by the town, funded by the CVRD to support delivery of the project, to ensure that, as I mentioned, 3.5 kilometers of streets, that's a lot of service connections, a lot of utilities that are being tied into and crossed. So it's our strong belief that position will really help to streamline the project and ensure that there isn't delays. It also touches on commitments by the CVRD and the town in terms of how to mitigate the risk of a dispute and then how to navigate them if they occur. It gets into detail about, highlights the importance of public safety and traffic management and provides some details on how that'll be accomplished. And similarly with communications, the roles and responsibilities, who's going to be communicating and how. So the CVRD and town staff have advanced the document to the point where it is now ready for commission review and approval in our view. There are several minor items that are remaining, including fully digesting and ensuring no conflicts with the 60% design that was provided by our detailed designers last week, Max Laney. And then, however, these last items are not in our view significant, and we're hoping the commission can approve finalization of the agreement today in advance of the town of Comox Council reviewing and approving the document at their next meeting towards the end of August, once those items are resolved. I'll stop here if there's any questions about the project agreement.
And we have Director Swift.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Chris. I'm just wondering how long we might anticipate the roads being dug up. I'm mostly concerned about the Comox Avenue part. So say from the roundabout or from the top of the hill.
So the durations are hard to estimate at this time. So we know that there's an 18-month construction window. We've made kind of rough estimates in our extensive consultation over the last couple of months with stakeholders about traffic impacts. I think we're hoping that the section from Bayside Road through to Rodello can be done in one shot, so continuously, and that section could take approximately 8 to 9 months, factoring in both of those roundabouts that work as well. Yeah.
And Director Morin.
Great, thank you, Chair. I did see a little bit in here around communications. It was fairly brief, but I guess I'm curious with the areas that Comox, the projects that are specific to Comox that they're kind of embedding in this and obviously covering the cost of. If residents are concerned about those aspects of this, it talks about in the report that communications sort of going through CVRD, but I was curious around those specific projects that are related to Comox, like the roundabout at the top of the hill. I guess just in projects that Courtney's done, there's always residents that have concerns about, you know, why did you put a light here, or why did you do this? I was also wondering how you were going to train the mother deer to get their children to use the roundabout as opposed to the crosswalks, because they've mastered the crosswalks. But anyway, just around the communication with the Comox projects is what I'm curious about. Thanks.
Yeah, no, you've highlighted an important point. So we have made the decision to hire a dedicated communications resource for the duration of the project. So that's a CVRD position through to the end of construction. And we envision that they will have a hand in developing our kind of exact approach there, but the principles are there in the agreement, in that all contact, all media contact, all public contact will be directed to the CVRD. Exactly how that is managed will be in part developed once we get that dedicated resource in place. But there will definitely be a line of communication established, so when people are reaching out to the town offices, they'll be redirected. I think fairly quickly over the course of the project, I think they'll adjust and start reaching out directly to the CVRD.
So just a quick follow-up. So although the Comox staff and engineers have kind of done the design of those specific projects, the communication is still going to go through the CVRD?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And Mr. Chair, I might add too, the town of Comox has done a significant amount of communications about their future road works and improvements. These are projects that have sort of been on their books for a while too. So there's been some level of engagement with their public. And we will be having at least 2 touch points of engagement with the public starting in the fall, in which town staff will be available, and certainly we'll be getting any feedback that we receive to help support us in this.
Thank you. And Director Grant.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just back to Director Swift's questions about road closure. So I just want to be really clear. We're going to be down at the bottom of Bay Brook. Is that going to be 1 lane traffic for, I think you said 9 months, 8 to 9 months? Is that what, are we looking at 1 lane, and then as we get to the top of the hill, we don't have to cross it again? Is that, I just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah, so I do have a subsequent slide where we talk to traffic mitigation, and it actually breaks down the alignment by section. But yes, so I mentioned 8 to 9 months, and the intention is that we have a minimum of 1 lane alternating, and depending on the section of that longer piece, that may or may not require some night shifts in order to allow them to be able to kind of stop or slow work during the day to allow that single lane. But we're definitely planning to constrain the contractors to require that minimum of 1 lane alternating through that section.
So this is when Courtney can do all the stuff they want to do, because everybody will be focused on us closing the road down. It's our 5th Street Bridge, right?
No comment on that one. Director Theus.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was interested in the communication, so I'm glad that Director Morin asked that. The other thought I had was just if you could just outline to me a little bit of how that financial contribution amount was decided upon. Thank you.
Yeah, so that $3 million value was the subject of a lengthy negotiation. We looked at, we did our best to assess the magnitude of the impact to the community. We looked at other jurisdictions, for example, the Capital Regional District, in their recent completion of their wastewater infrastructure, the treatment plant, pump station, and the force mains. Looked at their the agreements that were reached between them and their host communities as kind of reference points, and to kind of work towards that number. Yeah.
And Chris, if I might just follow up on that a bit, I think we all recognize that this project will have a huge impact on the town of Comox. And as a result, it makes sense that there's a certain amount of compensation that goes to Comox for enduring this. And at the same time, Comox has projects that they plan to go ahead with along the conveyance route. And so it makes sense to do those together rather than essentially dig up the streets twice. Have I encapsulated the rationale here for why we are proceeding in this particular way?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that was well put.
Could you expand on that just a little bit? I want to make sure this is on the public record because, we may well have questions from people who think that the Sewage Commission is somehow paying for municipal works in Comox.
Yeah, no, I don't think we can overstate the extent of the impact. We're working, as I've highlighted and as you'll see through the rest of the presentation, we're working very hard to mitigate the impact to Comox. But at the end of the day, this is a major project. We're cutting across 3.5 kilometers of the town, a large part of that being directly across the downtown core. So there is going to be impacts. It's important that at the end of the day, and as I also highlighted, not just from the construction, but also over the long term from the presence of that pipe in the roadway. So I think it was seen to be important, that at the end of the day, that there's a visible improvement arising from the project, and also that that we're not in a position where there's going to be further work happening along the alignment in short order, thereby magnifying the impact on Comox residents and businesses.
Thanks very much for that. I think it's a good example of how interdependent we are. And when a major project like this is going on, we do have to look at the impacts that each community is enduring and how we can help mitigate those. So thanks for that explanation. Any further questions or comments before Chris moves along? Back to you, Chris.
Great, thank you. At this point, I'm going to ask John to take over and talk about the project budget. Over to you, John.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm through the chair. Okay, there's my slide. So I drew the short straw today, and I'm talking about the budget and the increase to the budget. So the staff's recommendation is that the capital cost estimate be increased from what was presented in February to now, increased by $19 million. And that will bring the total project budget up to $101 million even. So I think I'll just briefly run through these line items here just to give some context to this. So when we're talking direct costs, this is your construction costs. This is your labor, your material, your consumables, fuel, that sort of thing. And you can see that we do have some increases. Largely, these increases are due to escalation. And I'm not talking future escalation, I'm talking escalation to date. So basically, from the time the estimates were developed in February to just about now, I think we revised these numbers actually in June, but the escalation factor, the construction cost index it increased 5.2%. So that information, that index comes from Engineering News Record, and it's kind of the industry standard for such things. So yeah, that's in large part where these increases came from. As well, there is some refinement in scope as we progress the design a bit more. Some things get added, some things get changed with diligence applied along the way. So that's really the direct costs there. And then we also had to consider going forward during construction. Actually, from our current estimate till midpoint of construction, what are the impacts going to be from escalation? We all see what's going on in the world around us with supply chain issues and inflation and just the uncertainty, worldwide, really. So there's impacts, of course, associated with that, and we're all feeling it. So we did get a cost consultant, BTY Consulting, that's what they do, is they're cost consultants, to forecast what the escalation will look like going forward to the midpoint of construction, which is roughly the end of 2023. So the table on the bottom just indicates what these rates would be. So to get us through to the end of 2022, we took the midpoint, we applied 9% for 2022, and then going forward through midpoint of construction into 2023, we used 5% for that. So that's where these the number went from 2.1 to 5.7. The original number used for calculating escalation was actually 3%, which was, in normal times, so was the standard. So that has gone up considerably. Engineering and CVRD, or CVRD and design build teams engineering, that's just again a factor of some escalation there. And then one of the big jumps is the land, legal, other cost, advisors and such. The acquisition costs for land have gone up quite significantly, as you can see here. And then you'll see the big jump in contingency from 16.4 to 20.3. Well, that's just a mathematical function there. As the direct costs go up, the contingency amount follows suit. It's just a factor that's applied. So what we end up having is this increase from 82 to 101. And the ask is that this budget be approved going forward.
Yes, and you carefully avoided the use of the word million when you talked about 82 to 101, but I think we all appreciate that. John or Chris, did you want to pause for questions now?
Yeah, let's do that. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Who'd like to have a first go at this? Director Grant.
I'll ask the ever-present question: what if it escalates beyond 101? Are we collecting enough money? Are we actually going to go out in our AAP and ask for enough? Or should we be maybe asking for a little more just in case? We only want to do this once. No, twice. We already did it once.
Yeah, totally understand and appreciate the question. We've put really careful thought into this revised estimate, and it does represent our best estimate without relaxing on the conservatism that has been present in our estimates to this point. So it was tempting in the face of the escalation to try and tighten up the estimate to reduce, but we avoided that. Our contingency levels remain at 30%, which is appropriate for this level of design. We feel we've taken hopefully the conservative approach in terms of estimating what further inflation we're likely to experience. All that to say, I think we're in good shape here. So the constraining piece relates to the amount of debt and authorization of such. And I think next we're going to go to Kevin, who's going to explain kind of our funding strategy for the project. I think I'm hoping you'll be reassured after his presentation.
Okay, because my next question was going to be about the AAP, and if for some reason the public were to say no to the AAP because the costs are just escalating, like anybody who's following this would find this to be ghastly the way this has gone. And I would hate to see the public rally up and go enough. And then we don't get the money. What happens if that were to occur? I guess maybe that's a Kevin question.
That's a good segue into the funding strategy. Yeah. Are there any further questions about the budget before we hand it over to Kevin?
It looks like Director Morin has a question.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, all of us have been following along with this process, and I think understand the rationale for, forging ahead. We certainly found out with the Fifth Street Bridge project that the longer you wait, the more the costs go up and up and up and up. But I think there probably will be some maybe queries around, you know, whether this is the right time with inflated borrowing costs and construction costs and all those issues that you brought up. And so I just wondered if you could maybe expand on, you know, considering all of that, why this is the right time for this, and maybe Kevin's able to talk a little bit about the borrowing costs and that aspect of it. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll speak to the first part, and then we'll hand it over to Kevin. So why now? There's two primary reasons. The first is the driver for this project in the first place, which is the environmental risk that is posed by our existing force main, and the capacity of our pump stations. So for delay at this point would push out the resolution of that and increase the chance of a failure of the pipe or an overflow of the pump stations. We all know the volatility of the weather, the rainfall as well as the storms. I think it's fair to say that risk is increasing. So that's a big one that I just remind the commission of. And then second of all, it's price, it's cost. I think it's generally true that it's never any cheaper to do something than it is to do it right now. And I think what this slide is highlighting is that there's never been more true, at least not in my lifetime. You're looking at those numbers, which are a little hard to read at the bottom there, but we're looking at about 14% escalation between now and the midpoint of construction. At the current rate of inflation, we're looking at about $750,000 of increased costs every month of delay.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to try and think about putting this off for a couple of years, that would translate between $5 to $10 million in additional cost to be carried by the community. Mm-hmm. And as the unfortunate case, both for the project as well as individual taxpayers, is that inflation it's kind of a ratchet. We don't expect costs to go down significantly. They may level off for a while in 2 or 3 years, but we're not going to go back mm-hmm. to the rates that we were seeing over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. And just before we go to Kevin, I just wanted to say that, I think we've been supportive of this for all those reasons that you mentioned. You also brought up the fact that some of these impacts that pose risk to the existing infrastructure have only gotten far worse in terms of climate events and major climate events. And so I think considering that, I think this is the prudent way to go. But I just wanted to make sure to ask the question, because I think it's important to remind the public that, the rationale for these decisions, and that we're actually being responsible with the tax dollars. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Director Swift.
Thanks, Chris. I'm just wondering, I think we've applied for a few grants to support this project, and I don't believe we've received any money yet, but I'm wondering if we can update the costs in any of those grants that we've applied for. Like we can apply with the new number. So, and if that's a benefit.
Yeah, so we have applied for one, like the only eligible kind of grant program that we've so far found for the project. John SD led application submitted in June. Unfortunately, that one limits out at $6 million contribution. So we could and we will update the program staff about changes to the project scope and budget, but it's not going to, given that limit of $6 million is not going to translate to a higher proportion, because it is capped at that 6 million. But we remain very diligent, or we're looking out very closely for other opportunities. There is a narrowing window of opportunity because they do tend to require submission prior to start of construction. So we have a narrowing window of opportunity. Yeah.
All right, and do you want to turn it over to Kevin now
Mr. Chair, just one comment before we go on to the financial strategy, and that is a little bit of background on the project budget here, and that's Appendix E. Appendix E in the staff report outlines to you some of the considerations that have been given to the total project scope. the opportunities for potential savings or reductions in scope. I just want to really commend staff, consultants, and the municipal staff as well that have really looked at every aspect of this project, especially since we were realizing these updated costs to see whether or not there was any way, shape, or form to reduce the scope, reduce the potential costs and impact to the taxpayer. I think that Appendix C just shows you some of the work that was done to evaluate and show you some of the circumstances around decisions that were made, but also outline to you that there was some scope reduction made throughout the design and development of this project that was just not seen as essential for the project. So with that, I'll pass it on to Kevin to talk about this strategy.
Thanks, Mr. Dyson. Appreciate that.
Kevin's gonna have to sit at the table.
Yeah, I think you'll have to sit at the table, Kevin.
Thanks. All right, thank you very much. Through the chair to the directors, good afternoon. So yes, in light of the project budget that John just reiterated, CBRD staff in consultation with municipal finance staff have come forward with a revised funding strategy. That revised funding strategy is contained in Schedule B of the staff report, and I'll be speaking to that briefly. Just maybe to back up initially. So as was previously noted, back in February of this year, we did bring forward a updated financial strategy at that time at that $82 million project budget. And that project budget was being funded by a combination of reserve contributions as well as long-term debt. And that broke down to approximately $30 million in reserve contributions between both our Capital Works Reserve and our DCC Reserve, and $52 million in long-term debt. That authority for long-term debt was obtained through a unified AAP process back in mid-2021. And on that basis, we were moving forward with the existing project budget at that time. Now, based on the cost escalations that were presented in front of you today, we have brought forward a revised funding strategy at that $101 million mark. So what's in front of you outlines that we're now looking at reserve contributions of just over 32 million, 32.3 million, again, broken down between our Capital Works Reserve and our DCC Reserve. The $52 million in long-term debt that is still approved by the electorate continues to be included in this financial plan. What we have put in front of you today as an interim strategy that we are recommending as recommendation 3 in the staff report is an additional $16.7 million in short-term debt. The reason we've put it forward in that manner is we do want to ensure that we are able to continue with the full project as is being presented this afternoon. As particularly given that we are well underway with our various procurement processes in this regard. This is being recommended as an interim strategy rather until such time as we can undertake a second alternative approval process, as Director Grant had alluded to, likely in early 2023, in the hopes of obtaining the support of the electorate to actually have that $16.7 million done through long-term rather than short-term debt. If we are, or upon being successful with respect to that AAP, we would then bring forward a revised financial plan at that time that would shift that onus from that short-term to long-term debt. So I just wanted to kind of lay out the rationale that we've put forward in that. And again, we have been in consultation with both the CFOs of Courtney and Comox and have reviewed this with them. And they've been supportive of the strategy that staff has put forward in that regard. So maybe can I get the next slide, Chris?
Kevin, can I just clarify something
Sure.
that might be a bit confusing? Are you saying that the $16.7 million in short-term debt would be part of the plan, but wouldn't actually be borrowed?
What staff are recommending is that we need to have a financial plan in place that we know we can move forward with. We don't want to prejudge what the outcome of an AAP process in the spring of 2023 would be. So we are putting this financial strategy forward as an interim step. We would obviously come back to the commission as part of our normal 2023-2027 financial planning process with any new information that might be available at that time. For example, we did speak to the possibilities of a grant opportunity. If that grant opportunity were to be successful, we would obviously look at building that into the mix, as would any other contributions that we may be able to ascertain with respect to supporting this overall project. So we do have a number of opportunities remaining with respect to when this would be brought forward to the commission for your deliberation. We're bringing it at this point today to solidify the financial plan as it currently sits. We would then bring it forward as part of our normal financial planning process, and then anticipate that upon a successful AAP in the spring, which likely wouldn't happen until after our adopted financial plan would have to be set, we would then probably come back to you at that time with a budget amendment.
So if an AAP at that time was successful, a revised financial plan would be presented that would include that in the long-term borrowing, which of course means lower interest rates, and the short-term borrowing wouldn't need to happen.
Correct. So as I said, there's certainly pros and cons to both. I mean, with a project of this nature, obviously our preference would be to fund, the debt components solely by long-term debt, using, what's basically what we call an intergenerational equity strategy. Just a fancy way of saying all of those ratepayers of today and tomorrow that benefit from the access and use of this should ultimately be paying some kind of contribution to the service. That wouldn't necessarily happen under a short-term debt scenario, because of course that debt's compressed to a term of 5 years rather than a longer term of 30 years, which long-term debt would be under.
Okay, thank you. Please carry on.
Okay, thank you. So the next slide that's on the screen here is just giving you a sense of what the resulting sewer levies would be under either of those financial strategy options. So under our desired option, or option A, which would be to have both the existing 52 million and that additional 16.7 under long-term debt, we would anticipate that we can manage that in line with the sewer levies that are already included in the 2022-2026 financial plan. So that would mean going into 2023, we'd be looking at a total sewer levy required of about 7.6 million, and then subsequent increases as already included in the financial plan to 8 million in 2024, 8.4 in 2025, and so on. If, however, we were to have the default to this interim option of having short-term debt included, it would ultimately result in some increases required to that sewer levy to deal with that additional debt servicing that would be required over that 5-year period of that short-term debt. So that would result in a total sewer levy for 2023 of 8.1 million versus 9 million in 2024, and then 9.5 million in 2025, leveling out just at about $10 million, and then slowly dipping back as we move into that 2030, 2031 range. But again, we will certainly be continuing to look at this going forward and be bringing back kind of some updated estimates when we move into our 23-27 financial planning. What we've also included in the staff report for information is just what that breakdown would then look like for each of the participating municipalities, both Courtenay and Comox. And right now that would be based on the existing apportionment model of the sewer levy, which is of course is based on the prior year's sewer flows. So right now, based on 2021 sewer flows, which results in Courtenay paying about 68% of the total levy, and Comox paying the balance of about 32%. We had then plotted out for your information what those breakdowns between the two jurisdictions would look like.
Thanks. And we do have a question from Director Theos.
Thank you very much. My question's in regards to the significance of this project, both complexity-wise and cost-wise. Were there other projects that were on the priority list that had now taken a back burner as a result of this project, and just interested in knowing what's the plan to bring them back at some point when we're well on the way with this one.
Sure, I can speak to that. I think the only project that has been impacted in terms of timing from the escalation of this project would be the waste management plan phase 1 project. So, but that is related to the kind of later than planned submission of the LWMP. So we're anticipating to submit that over the next month or so. So yeah, so all other things being equal, we're expecting the plan approval in 25. So we might have been ready to kind of pull the trigger on those projects right away. This is, I think we're counting on maybe delaying that about 1.5 years or 2 years. So that would be the only example of a project that's been deferred as a result of this one, but not significantly.
Yeah, and I can certainly support that as well. So yes, when developing this revised funding strategy, we did look at the entirety of the sewer service and all of the projects that are certainly on the books going forward, and definitely the LWMP process was a key one. So we really wanted to make sure that we looked at not only the serviceability of any potential debt we assumed, but also what the impacts on our reserves would be, because we really want to make sure that we're not draining our reserves, unreasonably low. And definitely, depending on which strategy we ultimately land with, those will have varying impacts on our reserve balances. But we've strived to really come up with what we feel is in either scenario a viable option for us to continue forward with the project, obviously with some pros and cons to each.
Thanks, Director Swift.
Thank you. I know would be really difficult to arrive at a number, but I'm wondering if you have a ballpark or a range for the impact to a household for just the sewer project.
Unfortunately, I don't, because really the way this particular service works is we requisition or issue a levy to the municipalities. So we basically say, this is what we require by way of funding to enable the service to move forward. And then we provide that to the municipalities. Then the municipalities each build that into their modeling with respect to their sewer services. And then that's what ultimately determines what that cost per household would be, whether, depending on how each municipality levies that out. So because we're not always privy to how the municipalities are structuring those levies, we can't really provide you a clear sense as to what that ultimate impact would be to the resident.
Okay, somebody's going to ask this question, if not around this table, out there in the community. What is the rationale for delaying the alternate approval process into the new year rather than doing it now, or potentially doing it in conjunction with the October 2015 municipal elections?
Yeah, absolutely. So the rationale is that until we have the proposal pricing come in from our procurement process, there is some level of uncertainty about what the final costs will be. So by holding off to initiate the AAP process until April and have it complete in the first quarter of next year, that allows us to have completed, per our current schedule, have completed the procurement process for the larger component of the two. So the design build, which is roughly 2/3 of the total project cost, we'll have that proposal pricing in hand in December, and that'll provide a higher level of certainty that we're actually prior to going out for another ask from the community.
So could that argument not be used for the approval of going ahead with the project at this stage as well, that it would be wiser to wait until we had more detail about those costs?
Well, we won't have that. We wouldn't have that certainty about costs until the procurement process is underway, and by initiating, there's an inherent commitment contractually in issuing the procurement process that we've committed to the project. So it's kind of the chicken and the egg
Yeah,
Mr.
very
Dixon.
much a chicken and egg.
Yeah.
We don't have the authority to procure the project unless you have a financial plan that can pay for the project. So the interim short-term borrowing gives us the authority to procure. The procurement results gives us the at least 2/3 known costs for the overall project and certainty for going to AAP.
Thanks very much. I think that's clear. And I don't see questions right now. Do you have more to present, Kevin or Chris?
I'll be passing it over to Chris at this point. Just maybe back to Director Swift's comment. I mean, I can certainly commit to, as part of the 23-27 financial planning, bringing back, what we would typically quote with most of our services, which would be an estimated residential tax rate. That will by no means be precise as to what ultimately each resident that pays into the Comox or Courtney Sewer Services would see, but it would give you a relative approximation.
Great, thanks, Kevin. And next up is our procurement strategy. And I'm going to ask John to step in and give an overview of this one again. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Chris, and through the chair. So yes, our procurement strategy is shown here. It's a fairly, I think, self-explanatory table, but I'll run us through it. Sorry. So broken into the two delivery methods for the project, both the design build contract and the design bid build for the town of Comox portion. So what we're showing here, the very bottom line is total budget for each. So all in capital cost. What we're looking for today, the request is to authorize staff to approve the maximum contract values for each of the two contracts. So for the design build, the 56.3 million and the 29.6 for the design bid build. These are, these numbers come from, as you've seen previously, a fairly rigorous estimating process. And there is healthy contingency built into these, and as well the allowance for escalation. So quite confident in these numbers, particularly with the design build contract, in that CVRD and its team of advisors and owner's engineer will be taking part in collaborative meetings with the proponents throughout the RFP process, and guiding them towards a contract value that's within the affordability limit for the project. So again, quite confident in these figures. So right now, our plan is for the design build contract is to release the RFP actually on next Monday, with a closing of early December and subsequent award in Q1 of 2023. The design bid build contract, that is the town of Comox portion, that is currently at about 60% design. So that is continuing through design development with collaboration with the town's input as well. And we would be looking to tender that in Q1 of 2023 with award expected early Q2. And both of these projects anticipated to be wrapping up at the end of 2024. So again, the request is to authorize staff to award these maximum contract values.
Thanks, John. And as there may be people tuning in or even at the table who haven't gone through this before, could you very briefly describe the essential difference between design build and design bid build, please?
Yeah, so I'll start with design bid build. That's the very much the traditional method that's very common in Canada. And that's really a case of the owner, in this case CVRD, engaging a design firm for this particular project. It's McElhaney, having them design the project, developing a tender package that goes out to a competitive bidding process, and all things being equal, lowest price wins. So that's traditional or conventional design bid build. For design build, that's often termed as alternative project delivery, but it's becoming very, very common these days. So for design build, it's a case of you develop you prepare a concept, a design concept, have some parameters around it, some guidelines that have to be kept within, and then you basically put it to competition and have proponents develop the design themselves, develop a price. They develop the design to a point where they can prepare a reasonable price that they can be confident in, and then they submit their price for both to design the works and deliver it. And again, generally it's lowest price wins, but there's other factors as well. And prior to that, there's a pre-qualification process to make sure that the proponents that you have shortlisted are qualified to have the experience, they have the individual experience, the corporate experience, and the chops basically to get it done successfully.
Thanks for that. And is a 30% contingency a common practice in these cases?
That's a function of the of where the design currently sits. So it's still at a very much conceptual level. The design bid build one's a bit more advanced, but so there's just that uncertainty or that lack of precision right now, just based on where the level to which the design has been developed right now. And that's common. That's a standard sort of the range. It's typically 25 to 35%, somewhere in there, for what we call a class C estimate.
And going back to earlier questions, am I correct in assuming that we can't get more detailed analysis of costs without giving the authority to proceed further with the stage that we're at?
Well, we won't know the actual cost until December 8th, I think is the date. That's when the submission, the design build competition closes.
Okay. Chris?
Yeah, no, nothing to add, just that John's, if there's no further questions on the procurement strategy, then John will provide an overview of our traffic mitigation efforts.
Yeah, next slide, please. Okay, so what you're seeing on the screen in front of you is not it's not carved in stone. It's not this is what it's going to be, but it's more like what it's probably going to be. And I say that because we've had our designers, both for the design build portion and the town portion, look at what it's going to take to construct the work efficiently, and find that balance between doing it efficiently, minimizing disruption to the public, and keeping costs within at a reasonable level. So upon that review, this is what we're looking at as the likely case for traffic impacts. So full stop there. What I want to say now is we're developing a strategy around this, because it's no matter how we slice it or dice it, this project is going to create a degree of pain. That's the fact. It's going to present challenges, but recognizing that, we are developing a strategy around this to manage it such that the pain is minimized to all practical extents. So there's some components to this strategy right now, this traffic mitigation strategy. So it's really part that's just been completed is we did a public engagement survey. So going out to the public businesses, concerned stakeholder groups, and asking them their thoughts on the project in the context of traffic impacts. And we've collected a great deal of data. I think there was 51 survey responses. So we're in the process of analyzing that right now. And we are also, the other part of the strategy, or one of the other parts, is we've engaged a traffic engineering firm, Urban Systems, so a locally based firm, to actually develop a traffic strategy. So this engagement process, these survey results will help inform them in developing their strategy. So what they're doing basically is they're looking at some of the constraints that our engineering team has indicated will be in place with the project, and they're doing their traffic analysis now and trying to determine how to approach each of these the best way, again, for minimal impact. So they're doing very detailed traffic analysis around this. And the third part of this is we're not doing this in isolation. We have established a working group, an intergovernmental working group between the various municipalities, CVRD, the town, Courtney, Comox First Nation, MOTI, and we meet regularly to discuss concerns and make sure everybody has eyes wide open and has a chance to input or provide feedback on this as it develops. So all this is going to ultimately inform the contractors, the builders. So we're setting some constraints, saying this is what you can and what you can't do, and this is what these are the rules you need to follow to make sure that the traffic impact is as minimal as practically possible. And also part of this, I'll go on, is a significant communication component. So we're going to be keeping the public informed as we proceed as well, and allow that exchange. So,
thanks very much, John. Questions from commission members, Director Swift?
Thanks, John. I'm sure this will be drawn to somebody's attention, but I'm looking at the area that says the rolling full block or 2 block closures, and it looks like it's going to interfere with our marina access. And so what I'm hoping is that there'll be some consideration given to the timing of that, so it's not going to impact the boaters from May until the end of September or some such window. So do you have any thoughts on that?
That is one of the constraints that we're going to be compelling the contractor to abide by. I don't have the details with me, but for example, like nautical days, not having any activity going on during nautical days, and making sure there's always access to the marina, the boat launch, that sort of thing. So this is all part of the discussion right now that's happening with the stakeholders.
And who lives in the area where there's an option for night work? Actually, that sounded rhetorical, but more specifically, do we have any concerns about residents who may live in that area?
So we have worked, preliminary work with town staff to assess that option for night work along that section. The town has indicated they have used night shifts in certain areas for a similar purpose in the past. So they were open to the idea. I think it's a matter of balancing the impact to the broader community of full closure during the day versus some localized impacts from night work. So I think that's what we're working with right now.
Fair enough. Further questions or comments? Director Morin.
Thanks, Chair. I guess I'm wondering about, I know with the Fifth Street Bridge, we worked a lot with transit as well in terms of coming up with strategies. There's the preferred transit lane, et cetera. There was a shuttle option, that kind of thing. So I just wondered if you had anything specific to offer around some of the creative ideas around utilizing transit and in helping maybe reduce the number of cars along that way. But there's lots of obviously First Nations elders and also elders in Comox who might welcome more of those shuttle type arrangements, that kind of thing. Thanks.
So through the chair, we have had engagement sessions directly with a number of what we call the key stakeholders, transit being one, emergency services being other examples. So yes, we are working with transit to get their ideas and make sure we incorporate them to the extent we can, including changing routes and also changing behaviors as well of the public, promoting things like bike cycling, that sort of stuff. So yes, working closely with them.
Thanks, John. I don't see any more questions, and we do have 4 recommendations. Are we ready to move to those, Chris?
So yeah, but there are, well, this one last slide here addresses some previous question from Director Swift. There are a couple more slides, but they aren't related directly to the recommendation. So we could choose to just go through quickly or not at all.
Let's go through quickly,
just
sure.
to ensure that we have sufficient time. So maybe instead of pausing after each slide now, I'll just keep going, and then we can save any further questions to the end. So what we wanted to highlight on this slide here is that there are 2 kind of big pieces we just wanted to make sure that the commission was aware of before proceeding with this decision. The first one is that there is an ongoing assessment of what to do next with that existing force main. So that's underway, and we plan to report back to the commission this fall. So preliminary results for options for decommissioning or continuing to use all or part of it indicate there's a range of costs between $5 and $15 million. It's not something that that has to happen right away. And for that matter, in that case, we are planning to proceed in parallel, report back with that assessment and potentially a recommendation. And then we would be embedding any cost implications within the subsequent financial plan. So definitely it's considered separate from this project. The second one disregards the future siting for a Comox pump station replacement. So the scope that we've ended up with in this project, just given the significant footprint constraints for the Comox pump station, previously referred to as the Jane Place station, the implication is that it's really just an upgrade that will get us closer to the end of kind of the planned life of that facility. So about 25 years. So just to flag, that is an implication of the approved scope. It's not like the Courtney pump station where we're building a new station that should have an 80+ year lifespan. It's much shorter than that. And so just a flag for the commission and for the town to be thinking about where that station might go at the end of its lifespan. Did that answer the question that you had before, Director Swift?
It kind of does. I'm just curious then, would you decommission the Jane Place? And also what restrictions would you have for elevation and so on for the new pump station?
Yeah, so it would likely be kept as a local. So there's, because all the pipes currently go there, it would likely be kept as a pump station and pushing over to a new one, maybe like a smaller station on that same footprint. And then from an elevation, that really does constrain where that other location could be in terms of distance from that spot. So it's in the vicinity, the nearby vicinity. Yeah. Yeah, the next, I was planning to walk through the permits, but this is actually attached to the agenda. So item 3 on the agenda is a pre-construction update. So we plan to bring these forward to the commission every month or 2 until construction, and they'd be providing updates on the permits and on the timing of key tasks. The only one I'll highlight here, just in light of the tight timeline, is that we have now completed the ALC approval process, and we have that permit in hand, which was a real win. We also have the Comox First Nation support for the mitigations plan that will be used to attach to our cultural heritage permit application shortly. And this slide was just meant to highlight the significant, this is kind of the key first part to the mitigations plan, and we'll be initiating this very shortly. So this is a series of boreholes and micro trenches along the alignment to allow us to assess the presence of archaeological materials before we dive into the project itself.
That looks like an engineer's and archaeologist's dream or nightmare, perhaps.
Yeah. And this is another table pulled from that pre-construction report that's attached to your agenda as item 3. And it just highlights the key tasks between us, between now and award of both of those components. We'll be providing an update on this table as we move forward. And then finally, the timeline ahead, just wanting to highlight the key kind of public interactions, so kind of the public facing pieces of the project. So this fall, a public engagement expected in November. So open houses and some other engagement aimed at updating the project, the public about the project and receiving more information that could help, that could be directed to the contractors to help them develop their traffic management plans. And then winter 23, starting to update the public on the timing of construction as we start to receive those schedules from our contractors, as well as the traffic management plans. Spring 23, as we had discussed earlier, the AAP for long-term borrowing completed in early spring. And then estimated start of construction, we're looking at April, early May at this point. And then with that 18 to 20 month duration, hoping to be completed, construction completed by the end of 2024. So that was a lot of information, but that's it from us. Happy to support the discussion.
Thanks very much, Chris. Questions or comments from commissioners before we move into the recommendations? All right. So essentially, if I can summarize, we have a compelling environmental risk that is the rationale for this project in the first place. The longer we wait, the greater that environmental risk becomes, while at the same time, the costs escalate. And that is the rationale for us proceeding as we are just now, even though it's going to cost us more than we originally thought due to the factors that have been outlined today.
Yep, correct.
Thank you. We'll move into the recommendations, and we have recommendation number 1 that the remaining sewer system conveyance project. Sorry, we haven't voted on receipt. Mr. Jason correctly points out. All in favor of receipt of the reports? Any opposed? That is carried unanimously. Recommendation 1, that the remaining sewer system conveyance project scope components not finalized in February 22 and is noted in the staff report today be fully endorsed, including the Courtney pump station location, installation methodology within Comox IR number 1, Lazo Marsh crossing pending final permitting approval from province of BC. Could we have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Grant, seconded by Swift. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Recommendation number 2. I'm going to read the therefore be it resolved that the Comox Valley Regional District and Town of Comox Sewer System Conveyance Project Agreement be approved in the form that is substantially compliant with Appendix D to the staff report dated August 5th, 2022. Moved by? Second. Moved by Grant, seconded by McGowan. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried unanimously. Recommendation number 3, that the sewer system conveyance project capital cost estimate to be increased by 19 million to a total capital cost estimate of $101 million. And that an alternative approval process be undertaken in early 2023 to seek the consent of the electors for an additional 16.7 million in long-term borrowing that would replace the need for short-term debt of that amount in 2024. Moved by Grant, seconded by McGowan. Any discussion? All those in favor? Are there any opposed? That's carried unanimously. Recommendation number 4, something to do with procurement. That as per bylaw number 510, being the Comox Valley Regional District Delegation of Purchasing Authority bylaw number 510/2018 and the Comox Valley Regional District Procurement Policy, the board authorizes the award of the design build and the design bid build contracts for the sewer system conveyance project to staff up to a maximum contract value of 56.3 million for the design build and 29.6 million for the Comox Valley Regional District's conveyance scope included within the design bid build component, but excluding the town of Comox infrastructure improvements. Moved by Grant, I believe, seconded by Swift. Any discussion, comments, questions? Last chance. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried unanimously. We move on to the final item on today's agenda, the pre-construction update, August 2022. Would that be you, Chris? Or have we already done that? We've already done that. All right, so that's just for receipt. Moved by Grant, seconded by McGowan. Any discussion, questions, comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that's carried. We have no new business, no addendum. Is there a seconder? All in favor? The meeting is terminated. Thank you very much, everyone. Much appreciated. Thanks to John and Chris and all the staff.
Thank you.